Welcome back to the Trading Post, y'all. I hope you're going to love this one. This is a trip, man. We got way too much going on in this. And there's more than one rabbit hole in this bad boy. I could tell you that right now. But anyways, me and Noodle loved this one, didn't we, Noodle? You loved this one, didn't you? See that? He's telling you, yeah. This is episode 23. The Real Life James Bond, Sidney Reilly. Part 1. Hey, everybody. I just put him back up. Anyways, as I said prior, this is episode 23, the real life James Bond, Sidney Reilly. Now, Sidney George Reilly, MC, circa 1873 to November 5th, 1925, known as the Ace of Spies, was a Russian-born adventurer and secret agent employed by Scotland Yard's Special Branch and later by the Foreign Section of the British Secret Service Bureau, the precursor to the modern British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6/SIS. He is alleged to have spied for at least 4 different great powers, and documentary evidence indicates that he was involved in espionage activities in 1890s London among Russian emigre circles, in Manchuria on the eve of the Russo-Japanese War, circa 1904 to 1905, and in an abortive 1918 coup d'etat against Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik government in Moscow. Reilly disappeared in Soviet Russia in the mid-1920s, lured by the Cheka's Operation Trust. British diplomat and journalist R.H. Bruce Lockhart publicized his and Reilly's 1918 exploits to overthrow the Bolshevik regime in Lockhart's 1932 book, Memoirs of a British Agent. This became an international bestseller and garnered global fame for Reilly. The memoirs retold the efforts by Reilly, Lockhart, and other conspirators to sabotage the Bolshevik Revolution while still in its infancy. The world press made Reilly into a household name within 5 years of his execution by Soviet agents in 1925, lauding him as a peerless spy and recounting his many espionage adventures. Newspapers dubbed him the greatest spy in history and the Scarlet Pimpernel of Red Russia. The London Evening Standard described his exploits in an illustrated serial in May 1931 headlined Master Spy. Ian Fleming used him as a model for James Bond in his novels set in the early Cold War. Reilly is considered to be the dominating figure in the mythology of modern British espionage. Now, we're going to discuss his birth and youth. The true details about Reilly's origin, identity, and exploits have eluded researchers and intelligence agencies for more than a century. Reilly himself told several versions of his background to confuse and mislead investigators. At different times in his life, he claimed to be the son of an Irish merchant seaman, an Irish clergyman, and an aristocratic landowner connected to the court of Emperor Alexander III of Russia. According to a Soviet secret police dossier compiled in 1925, he was perhaps born Zygmunt Markovich Rosenblum on March 24, 1874, in Odessa, a Black Sea port of Emperor Alexander II's Russian Empire. His father Marcus was a doctor and shipping agent, according to this dossier, while his mother came from an impoverished noble family. Other sources claim that Reilly was born Georgy Rosenblum in Odessa on March 24, 1873. In one account, his birth name is given as Solomon Rosenblum in Kherson Gubernia of the Russian Empire, the illegitimate son of Polina, or Perla, and Dr. Mikhail Abramovich Rosenblum, the cousin of Reilly's father, Grigory Rosenblum. There is also speculation that he was the son of a merchant marine captain and Paulina. Yet, Another source states that he was born Sigmund Georgievich Rosenblum on March 24th, 1874, the only son of Pauline and Gregory Rosenblum, a wealthy Polish Jewish family with an estate at Bielsk in the Grodno Governorate of Imperial Russia. His father was known locally as George rather than Gregory, hence Sigmund's patronymic Georgievich. The family seems to have been well connected in Polish nationalist circles through Pauline's intimate friendship with Ignacy Jan Paderewski, the Polish statesman who became Prime Minister of Poland and also Poland's foreign minister in 1919. According to reports of the Tsarist political police, the Okhrana, Rosenblum was arrested in 1892 for political activities and for being a courier for a revolutionary group known as the Friends of Enlightenment. He escaped judicial punishment, and he later was friends with Okhrana agents such as Alexander Nikolaevich Grammatikov, and these details might indicate that he was a police informant even at this young age. Wow. Oh my God, excuse me for that. After Reilly's release, his father told him that his mother was dead and that his biological father was her Jewish doctor, Mikhail A. Rosenblum. Distraught by this news, he faked his death in Odessa harbor and stowed away aboard a British ship bound for South America. In Brazil, he adopted the name Pedro and worked odd jobs as a dock worker, a road mender, a plantation laborer, and a cook for a British intelligence expedition in 1895. He allegedly saved both the expedition and the life of Major Charles Fothergill when hostile natives attacked them. Rosenblum seized a British officer's pistol and killed the attackers with expert marksmanship. Fothergill rewarded his bravery with £1,500 sterling, a British passport, and passage to Britain, where Pedro became Sidney Rosenblum. However, the record of evidence indicates that Rosenblum arrived in London from France in December of 1895, prompted by his unscrupulous acquisition of a large sum of money and a hasty departure from Saint-Maur-des-Fossés, a residential suburb of Paris. According to this account, Rosenblum and his Polish accomplice Jan Wojtek waylaid two Italian anarchists on December 25, 1895, and robbed them of a substantial amount of revolutionary funds. One anarchist's throat was cut. The other, named Constant de la Casa, died from knife wounds in Fontainebleau Hospital 3 days later. The French newspaper L'Union Républicaine des Saonnets Loire reported the incident on December 27, 1895. A dramatic event occurred on a train between Paris and Fontainebleau. On opening the door of one of the coaches, the railway staff discovered an unfortunate passenger lying unconscious in the middle of a pool of blood. His throat had been cut, and his body bore the marks of numerous knife wounds. Terrified at the sight, the station staff hastened to inform the special investigator, who started preliminary inquiries and sent the wounded man to the hospital in Fontainebleau. Police learned that the physical description of one assailant matched Rosenblum's, but he was already en route to Britain intelligence officers about this incident and other dealings with Rosenblum. Several months prior to this murder, Rosenblum had met Ethel Lillian Bull, a young English woman who was a budding writer and active in Russian émigré circles. The couple developed a rapport and began a sexual liaison, and he told her about his past in Russia. After the affair concluded, they continued to correspond. In 1897, Bull published The Gadfly, a critically acclaimed novel whose central character was allegedly based on Reilly's life as Rosenblum. In the novel, the protagonist is a bastard who feigns his suicide to escape his illegitimate past, and then voyages to South America. He later returns to Europe and becomes involved with Italian anarchists and other revolutionaries. For decades, certain biographers had dismissed the Reilly-Bull liaison as unsubstantiated. However, evidence was found in 2016 among archived correspondence in the extended Bull-Hinton family confirming that a relationship transpired between Reilly and Bull around 1895 in Florence. There is some question of whether he was truly smitten with Bull and sincerely returned her affections, as he might have been a paid police informant reporting on her activities and those of her radicals. Ah, man, what a tangled web we weave. My God. Okay, Reilly continued to go by the name Rosenblum, living at the Albert Mansions, an apartment block in Rosetta Street, Waterloo, London, in early 1896. He created the Ozone Preparations Company, which peddled patent medicines, and he became a paid informant for the Emigre Intelligence Network of William Melville, Superintendent of Scotland Yard's Special Branch. Melville later oversaw a special section of the British Secret Service Bureau founded in 1909. In 1897, Rosenblum began an affair with Margaret Thomas, or Nee Callahan, the youthful wife of Reverend Hugh Thomas. Oh, man, say it ain't so. Bro, what are you doing? Okay, the youthful wife of Reverend Hugh Thomas shortly before her husband's death. Rosenblum met Reverend Thomas in London through his Ozone Preparations Company because Thomas had a kidney inflammation and was intrigued by the miracle cures peddled by Rosenblum. Reverend Thomas introduced Rosenblum to his wife at his manor house, and they began having an affair. Obviously not at that point in time, I wouldn't think, but maybe shortly after. Let's just use our common sense here. On March 4th, 1898, Hugh Thomas altered his will and appointed Margaret as an executrix. He was found dead in his room on March 12, 1898, just a week after the new will was made. A mysterious Dr. T.W. Andrew, whose physical description matched that of Rosenblum, appeared to certify Thomas's death as generic influenza and proclaimed that there was no need for an inquest. Records indicate that there was no one by the name of Dr. T.W. Andrew in Great Britain circa 1897. Oh my God. Margaret Thomas insisted that her husband's body be ready for burial 36 hours after his death. She inherited roughly 800,000 pounds. The Metropolitan Police did not investigate Dr. T.W. Andrew, nor did they investigate the nurse whom Margaret had hired, who was previously linked to the arsenic poisoning of a former employer. What? Man, we're going down some rabbit holes in this bad boy. All right, I ain't even touching on that. Y'all figure your thing out here. We're going to come to this. Put comments down below what you think about things. Let's continue on. This is a long one, okay? It's going to be probably broken up in a couple episodes. I'm just going to tell you that right now. 4 months later, on August 22nd, 1898, Rosenblum married Margaret Thomas at Holborn Registry Office in London. The two witnesses at the ceremony were Charles Richard Cross, a government official, and Joseph Bell, an admiralty clerk. Both would eventually marry daughters of Henry Freeman Penay, an associate of William Melville. The marriage not only brought the wealth which Rosenblum desired, but provided a pretext to discard his identity of Sigmund Rosenblum. With Melville's assistance, he crafted a new identity, Sidney George Reilly. Oh. This new identity was key to achieving his desire to return to the Russian Empire and voyage to the Far East. Reilly obtained his new identity and nationality without taking any legal steps to change his name and without making an official application for British citizenship, all of which suggests some type of official intervention. This intervention likely occurred to facilitate his upcoming work in Russia on behalf of British intelligence. Sidney Reilly's role is one of the unsolved riddles about the Russo-Japanese War. In June 1899, The newly endowed Reilly and his wife Margaret traveled to Emperor Nicholas II's Russian Empire using Reilly's forged British passport, a travel document, and a cover identity, both purportedly created by William Melville. While in St. Petersburg, he was approached by General Akashi Motohiro, circa 1864 to 1919. That's his lifespan, to work for the Japanese Secret Intelligence Services. For real? Y'all. For real? This is what it's getting down to? We ain't even started in this bad boy yet. Now keep in mind, y'all keep these certain points in mind. I'm telling you, there's a lot here. Okay. Let me get a drink real quick. Wow. You guys, this is crazy. It's just plain crazy. Let's continue on. A keen judge of character, Motohiro believed the most reliable spies were those who were motivated by profit instead of by feelings of sympathy towards Japan, and accordingly, he believed Reilly to be such a person. As tensions between Russia and Japan were escalating towards war, Motohiro had at his disposal a budget of 1 million yen provided by the Japanese Ministry of War to obtain information on the movements of Russian troops and naval developments. Motohiro instructed Reilly to offer financial aid to Russian revolutionaries in exchange for information about the Russian intelligence services, and more importantly, to determine the strength of the Russian armed forces, particularly in the Far East. Accepting Motohiro's recruitment overtures, Reilly now became simultaneously an agent for both the British War Office and the Japanese Empire. While his wife Margaret remained in St. Petersburg, Reilly allegedly reconnoitered the Caucasus for its oil deposits and compiled a resource prospectus as part of the Great Game. He reported his findings to the British government, which paid him for the assignment. Shortly before the Russo-Japanese War, Reilly appeared in Port Arthur, Manchuria, in the guise of a timber company owner. Here he remained for 4 years, familiarizing himself with political conditions in the Far East and obtaining a degree of personal influence in the ongoing espionage activities in the region. At the time, he was still a double agent for the British and Japanese governments. The Russian-controlled Port Arthur lay under the ever-darkening specter of a Japanese invasion, and Reilly and his business partner, Moisei Akimovich Ginsburg, turned the precarious situation to their benefit. By purchasing and reselling enormous amounts of foodstuffs, raw materials, medicine, and coal, they made a small fortune as war profiteers. This dude's all about that money, boy. He's hustling it. Dangerous game you're playing, though, bro. When it gets hot, it gets hot. So, Reilly would have an even greater success in January 1904 when he and Chinese engineer acquaintance Ho Liang Sheng allegedly stole the Port Arthur harbor defense plans for the Japanese Navy. Guided by these stolen plans, the Japanese Navy navigated by night through the Russian minefield protecting the harbor and launched a surprise attack on Port Arthur on the night of February 8th to 9th in 1904. However, the stolen plans did not help the Japanese much. Despite ideal conditions for a surprise attack, their combat results were relatively poor. Although more than 31,000 Russians ultimately perished defending Port Arthur, Japanese losses were much higher, and these losses nearly undermined their war effort. According to writer Winfried Ludecky, Reilly quickly became an obvious target of suspicion by Russian authorities at Port Arthur. Thereafter, he discovered one of his business subordinates was an agent of Russian counterespionage and chose to leave the region. Upon departing Port Arthur, Reilly traveled to Imperial Japan in the company of an unidentified woman, where he was handsomely paid by the Japanese government for his prior intelligence services. If he made a detour to Japan, presumably to be paid for his espionage, he could not have stayed very long, for by February of 1905 he appeared in Paris. By the time he had returned to Europe from the Far East, Reilly had become a self-confident international adventurer who was fluent in several languages and whose intelligence services were highly desired by various great powers. At the same time, he was described as possessing a foolhardy, adventurous nature, prone to taking unnecessary risks. This would later result in him being nicknamed Reckless by other British agents. Fair enough. I mean, he is reckless if he's taking unnecessary risks, right? But now we're going to go into this is going to say this subject here is the continental exploits. Okay, this is his different exploits. This is the DRC affair. During the brief time Reilly spent in Paris, he renewed his close acquaintance with William Melville, whom Reilly had last seen just prior to his 1899 departure from London. While Reilly had been abroad in the Far East, Melville had resigned in November 1903 as superintendent of Scotland Yard's Special Branch and had become chief of a new intelligence section in the War Office. Working under commercial cover from an unassuming flat in London, Melville now ran both counterintelligence and foreign intelligence operations using his foreign contacts, which he had accumulated during his years running Special Branch. Reilly's meeting with Melville in Paris is most significant, for within a matter of weeks, Melville was to use Reilly's expertise in what would later become known as the DRC affair. Okay, let's find out what this DRC affair is, y'all. In 1904, the Board of the Admiralty projected that petroleum would supplant coal as the primary source of fuel for the Royal Navy. As petroleum was not abundant in Britain, it would be necessary to find and secure sufficient supplies overseas. During their investigation, the British Admiralty learned that an Australian mining engineer, William Knox D'Arcy, who founded the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, had obtained a valuable concession from Mozaffar al-Din Shah Kahar regarding oil rights in southern Persia. D'Arcy was negotiating a similar concession from the Ottoman Empire for oil rights in Mesopotamia. The Admiralty initiated efforts to entice D'Arcy to sell his newly acquired oil rights to the British government rather than to the French Rothschilds. Reilly, at the British Admiralty's request, located William D'Arcy at Caen in the south of France and approached him in disguise. Dressed as a Catholic priest, Reilly gate-crashed the private discussions on board the Rothschild yacht on the pretext of collecting donations for a religious charity. He then secretly informed D'Arcy that the British could give him a better financial deal. D'Arcy promptly terminated negotiations with the Rothschilds and returned to London to meet with the British Admiralty. However, biographer Andrew Cook has questioned Reilly's involvement in the D'Arcy affair, since in February 1904, Reilly might still have been in Port Arthur. Cook speculates that it was Reilly's intelligence chief, William Melville, and a British intelligence officer, Henry Curtis Burnett, who undertook the D'Arcy assignment. Yet, another possibility advanced in the prize by writer Daniel Jurgen has the British Admiralty creating a syndicate of patriots to keep D'Arcy's concession in British hands, apparently with the full and eager cooperation of D'Arcy himself. Although the extent of Reilly's involvement in this particular incident is uncertain, it has been verified that he stayed after the incident in the French Riviera on the Côte d'Azur, a location very near the Rothschild yacht. At the conclusion of the D'Arcy affair, Reilly journeyed to Brussels, and in January 1905, he returned to St. Petersburg, Russia. Damn, y'all, he's hopping like a rabbit from place to place. Man, this dude is all over. I mean, damn, he's stoking some fires up, man. He's brazen. I give him that. Let's get into this. This is we're going to talk about the Frankfurt Air Show, y'all. In Ace of Spies, biographer Robin Bruce Lockhart recounts Reilly's alleged involvement in obtaining a newly developed German magneto at the first Frankfurt International Air Show in 1909. According to Lockhart, on the fifth day of the air show in Frankfurt am Main, a German plane lost control and crashed, killing the pilot. The plane's engine was alleged to have used a new type of magneto that was far ahead of other designs. Reilly and the British SIS agent posing as one of the exhibition pilots diverted the attention of spectators while they removed the magneto from the wreck and substituted another. The SIS agent quickly made detailed drawings of the German magneto, and when the airplane had been removed to a hangar, the agent and Reilly managed to restore the original magneto. However, later biographers such as Spence and Cook have countered that this incident is unsubstantiated. There is no documentary evidence of any plane crashes occurring during the event. Another rabbit hole, y'all. Stealing weapons plans. Okay, this is the next subject. Man, these dudes are stealing all kind of shit. In 1909, when the German Kaiser was expanding the war machine of Imperial Germany, British intelligence had scant knowledge regarding the types of weapons being forged inside Germany's war plans. At the behest of British intelligence, Reilly was sent to obtain the plans for the weapons. Reilly arrived in Essen, Germany, disguised as a Baltic shipyard worker by the name of Karl Hahn. Having prepared his cover identity by learning to weld at a Sheffield engineering firm, Reilly obtained a low-level position as a welder at the Krupp Gun Works plant in Essen. Soon he joined the plant fire brigade and persuaded its foreman that a set of plant schematics were needed to indicate the position of fire extinguishers and hydrants. These schematics were soon lodged in the foreman's office for members of the fire brigade to consult, and Reilly set about using them to locate the plans. In the early morning hours, Reilly picked the lock of the office where the plans were kept and was discovered by the foreman, whom he then strangled before completing the theft. From Essen, Reilly took a train to a safe house in Dortmund. Tearing the plans into 4 pieces, he mailed each separately so that if one were lost, the other 3 would still reveal the essence of the plans. Biographer Cook questions the veracity of this incident, but concedes that German factory records show a Karl Hahn was indeed employed by the Essen plant during this time, and that a plant fire brigade existed. In fact, before the First World War, he is alleged to have operated in Russia from September 1905 to April 1914. Assistant Naval Attaché of Great Britain, then in Europe. By April 1912, Reilly returned to St. Petersburg, where he assumed the role of a wealthy businessman and helped to form the Wings Aviation Club. In the reference book, All Petersburg, he was listed as antique dealer collector. Here he took a new wife, Nadezhda, without dissolving his marriage to Margaret. What a hussy he is, huh? He resumed his friendship with Alexander Grammatikov, who was an Okrana agent and a fellow member of the club. Writers Richard Deacon and Edward van der Rohe assert that Reilly actually was an Okrana double agent at this point. Deacon claims he was tasked with befriending and profiling Sir Basil Zaharoff, the international arms salesman and representative of Vickers Armstrong Munitions Limited. Another Reilly biographer, Richard B. Spence, claims that during this assignment, Reilly learned le système from Zaharoff, the strategy of playing all sides against each other to maximize financial profit. However, biographer Andrew Cook asserts there is scant evidence of any relationship between Reilly and Zaharoff. Now, that's a lot to swallow, you guys. That's a lot right there. Damn, this dude. I'm telling you what, man. This dude he's got some brass balls on him. Anyway, let's go to the next one. First World War activity. Okay? This is his activity in First World War. Now, this is a note starting out right out the gate. I don't know why the hell I did that, but whatever. Note is, Reilly was dropped by plane many times behind the German lines. Sometimes in Belgium, sometimes in Germany, sometimes disguised as a peasant, sometimes as a German officer or soldier, when he usually carried forged papers to indicate he had been wounded and was on sick leave from the front. In this way, he was able to move throughout Germany with complete freedom. In earlier biographies by Winfried Ludecki and Pepita Bobadilla, Reilly is described as living as a spy in Wilhelmine, Germany from 1917 to 1918. Drawing upon the latter sources, Richard Deacon likewise asserted that Reilly had operated behind German lines on a number of occasions and once spent weeks inside the German Empire gathering information about the next planned thrust against the Allies. In one version by Lockhart, Reilly is alleged to have been a part of a German war meeting involving Kaiser Wilhelm II. Really? However, most later biographies concur that Reilly's activities in the United States between 1915 and 1918 precluded any such escapades on the European front. Now, later biographers believe that Reilly, while lucratively engaged in the munitions business in New York City, was covertly employed in British intelligence, in which role he may well have participated in several acts of so-called German sabotage, deliberately calculated to provoke the United States to enter the war against the Central Powers. Wow. This dude ain't got no boundaries, bro. He's all on it, man. Every daggone side he can jack with, he's doing it. Shit. Anyway, historian Christopher Andrew notes that Reilly spent most of the first 2.5 years of the war in the United States. Likewise, author Richard B. Spence states that Reilly lived in New York City for at least a year, from 1914 to 1915, roughly around about, where he engaged in arranging munitions sales to the Imperial German Army and its enemy, the Imperial Russian Army. However, when the United States entered the war in April 1917, Reilly's business became less profitable since his company was now prohibited from selling ammunition to the Germans, and after the Russian Revolution occurred in October 1917, the Russians were no longer buying munitions. Faced with unexpected financial hardship, Reilly sought to resume his paid intelligence work for the British government while in New York City. Okay, you guys, what are you thinking so far? This is a pretty interesting story, huh? This dude got a daggone, it's like a fairy tale, you know? Now, this is confirmed by papers of Norman Thwaites, MI1 head. He's the head of station in New York, which contain evidence that Reilly approached Thwaites seeking espionage-related work in 1917 and 1918. Formerly a private secretary to newspaper magnate Joseph Pulitzer and a police reporter for Pulitzer's The New York World, Thwaites was keen on obtaining information concerning radical activities in the United States. In particular, any connections between American socialists with Soviet Russia. Consequently, under Thwaites' direction, Reilly presumably worked alongside a dozen other British intelligence operatives attached to the British mission at 44 Whitehall Street in New York City. Although their ostensible mission was to coordinate with the U.S. government in regards to intelligence about the German Empire and Soviet Russia, the British agents also focused upon obtaining trade secrets and other commercial information related to American industrial companies for their British rivals. Thwaites was sufficiently impressed with Reilly's intelligence work in New York that he wrote a letter of recommendation to Mansfield Cumming, the head of MI1. It was also Thwaites who recommended that Reilly first visit Toronto to obtain a military commission, which is why Reilly enlisted in the Royal Flying Corps Corps, Canada. On October 19, 1917, Reilly received a commission as a temporary second lieutenant on probation. After receiving this commission, Reilly voyaged to London in 1918, where Cumming formerly swore Lieutenant Reilly into service as a staff case officer in His Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service, or SIS. Prior to dispatching Reilly on counter-Bolshevik operations in Germany and Russia, according to Reilly's wife, Pepita Bobadilla, Reilly was sent to Russia to counter the work being done there by German agents who were supporting radical factions and to discover and report on the general feeling. Thus, Reilly arrived on Russian soil via Murmansk prior to April 5th, 1918, where he contacted the former Ukraine agent Alexander Gramatikov, who believed the Soviet government was in the hands of the criminal classes and of lunatics released from the asylums. And that is a quote from him. Gramatikov arranged for Reilly to receive a private interview with either Reilly's longtime friend General Mikhail Bonch-Bruyevek or Vladimir Bonch-Bruyevek, Secretary of the Council of People's Commissars. With the clandestine aid of Bonch-Bruyevek, he assumed the role of a Bolshevik sympathizer. Gramatikov further instructed his niece, Dagmara Karozis, a dancer with the Moscow Art Theater, to allow Reilly to use her apartment as a safe house, and through Vladimir Orlov, a former Ukraine associate turned Cheka official, Reilly obtained travel permits as a Cheka agent. My head's spinning, y'all. How about you? Already. We got this. I feel like I just got out of being slammed into a washing machine, you know? I can't even touch up on it. We'll try and touch up on it at the end, but this is going to be a long one. We might not even be able to really touch it up much. But Ambassador's plot. Let's go to that. That's the next thing. In 1918, behind-the-scenes helpers such as Sidney Reilly, the erstwhile Russian double agent who was operating on Britain's behalf, were involved in the formulation and execution of various attempts to snatch both Russia and the Romanov family from the Bolsheviks. Okay, the attempt to assassinate Vladimir Lenin and to depose the Bolshevik government is considered by biographers to be Reilly's most daring exploit. The Ambassador's plot, later misnamed in the press as the Lockhart-Reilly plot, has sparked a considerable debate over the years. Did the Allies launch a clandestine operation to overthrow the Bolsheviks in the later summer of 1918? And if so, did Felix Dzerzhinsky's Cheka uncover the plot at the 11th hour, or did they know of the conspiracy from the outset? Good questions to ask. Let's be honest. The only dumb question is the questions not asked, as I was always told. And it says, at this time, the disassembling American Consul General DeWitt Clinton Poole publicly insisted the Cheka orchestrated the conspiracy from beginning to end, and that Reilly was a Bolshevik agent provocateur. Later, Robert Bruce Lockhart would state that he was not to this day sure of the extent of Reilly's responsibility for the disastrous turn of events. In January 1918, the youthful Lockhart, a mere junior member of the British Foreign Office, had been personally handpicked by British Prime Minister David Lloyd George to undertake a sensitive diplomatic mission to Soviet Russia. Lockhart's assigned objectives were to liaise with the Soviet authorities, to subvert Soviet-German relations, and to bolster Soviet resistance to German peace overtures, and to push Soviet authorities into recreating the Eastern Theater. By April, however, Lockhart had hopelessly failed to achieve any of these objectives. He began to agitate in diplomatic cables for an immediate full-scale Allied military intervention in Russia. Concurrently, Lockhart ordered Reilly to pursue contacts within anti-Bolshevik circles to sow the seeds for an armed uprising in Moscow. In May of 1918, Lockhart, Reilly, and various agents of Allied powers repeatedly met with Boris Savinkov, head of the Counter-Revolutionary Union for the Defense of the Motherland and Freedom, or UDMF. Now, Savinkov had been deputy war minister in the provisional government of Alexander Fyodorovich Kerensky and a key opponent of the Bolsheviks. A former Socialist Revolutionary Party member, Savinkov had formed the UDMF consisting of several thousand Russian fighters, and he was receptive to Allied overtures to depose the Soviet government. Lockhart, Reilly, and others then contacted anti-Bolshevik groups linked to Savinkov and Socialist Revolutionary Party cells affiliated with Savinkov's friend Maximilian Filanenko. Lockhart and Reilly supported these factions with SIS funds. They also liaised with DeWitt Clinton Poole and Fernand Grenard, the consuls general of the United States and France, respectively. They also coordinated their activities with intelligence operatives affiliated with the French and U.S. consuls in Moscow. In June, delusioned elements of Colonel Edward Berzin's Latvian Rifle Division, or Latvia Divizia, began appearing in anti-Bolshevik circles in Petrograd and were eventually directed to a British naval attaché, Captain Francis Cromie, and his assistant, Mr. Constantine, a Turkish merchant who was actually Reilly. In contrast to his previous espionage operations, which had been independent of other agents, Reilly worked closely while in Petrograd with Cromie in joint efforts to recruit Berzin's Latvians and to equip anti-Bolshevik armed forces. At the time, Cromie purportedly represented the British Naval Intelligence Division and oversaw its operations in northern Russia. Cromie operated in loose coordination with the ineffectual commander Ernest Boyce, the M1 station chief in Petrograd. As Berzin's Latvians were deemed the Praetorian Guard of the Bolsheviks and entrusted with the security of both Lenin and the Kremlin, the Allied plotters believed their participation in the pending coup to be vital. With the aid of the Latvian riflemen, the Allied agents hoped to seize both Lenin and Trotsky at a meeting to take place in the first week of September. Reilly arranged a meeting between Lockhart and the Latvians at the British mission in Moscow, while purportedly extending over 1 million rubles to bribe the Red Army troops guarding the Kremlin. At this stage, Cromie, Boyce, Reilly, Lockhart, and other Allied agents allegedly planned a full-scale coup against the Bolshevik government and drew up a list of Soviet military leaders ready to assume responsibilities on its demise. Their objective was to capture or kill Lenin and Trotsky, to establish a provisional government, and to extinguish Bolshevism. Lenin and Trotsky, they reasoned, were Bolshevism and nothing else in their movement had substance or permanence. Consequently, if he could get them into their hands, there would be nothing of consequence left of Sovietism. As Lockhart's diplomatic status hindered his open engagement in clandestine activities, he chose to supervise such activities from afar and to delegate the actual direction of the coup to Reilly. To facilitate this work, Reilly allegedly obtained a position as a sinecure within the criminal branch of the Petrograd Cheka. It was during this chaotic time of plots and counterplots that Reilly and Lockhart became further acquainted. Lockhart later posthumously described him as a man of energy and personal charm, very attractive to women and very ambitious. I had not a very high opinion of his intelligence. His knowledge covered many subjects from politics to art, but it was superficial. On the other hand, his courage and indifference to danger were superb. Throughout their backroom intrigues in Moscow, Lockhart never openly questioned Reilly's loyalty to the Allies, although he privately wondered if Reilly had made a secret bargain with Colonel Berzin and his Latvian riflemen to later seize power for themselves. In Lockhart's estimation, Reilly was a limitless man cast in the Napoleonic mold, and if their counter-revolutionary coup had succeeded, the prospect of playing a lone hand using Berzin's Latvian riflemen may have inspired him with a Napoleonic design to become the head of any new government. However, unbeknownst to the Allied conspirators, Berzin was an honest commander and devoted to the Soviet government. Although not a Chekist, he nonetheless informed Dzerzhinsky's Cheka that he had been approached by Reilly and that Allied agents had attempted to recruit him into a possible coup. This information did not surprise Dzerzhinsky, as the Cheka had gained access to the British diplomatic codes in May and were closely monitoring the anti-Bolshevik activities. Dzerzhinsky instructed Berzin and other Latvian officers to pretend to be receptive to the Allied plotters and to meticulously report on every detail of their pending operation.